5 years ago, she used my dad's phone to text my mom and told her that she and my father were meant to be together. 5 years later, I looked her husband in the eye and said calmly, "I never meant to come between you two. I thought it was just a satisfying game of revenge. Poetic justice." Sweet and sharp. What I didn't expect was the man I had worked so hard to seduce would corner me one night. Eyes dark and voice low, asking, "You're really not going to take responsibility for me? Happy New Year!" The moment I opened my phone, a stream of messages popped up with well wishes. I locked the screen and set the phone down, resting my chin in one hand as I turned toward the man beside me. Smiling faintly, I raised my glass. I haven't celebrated New Year in years. If I hadn't known this man was already in his early 30s, I never would have guessed. He looked younger, or maybe just quietly graceful in a way that defied age. "Why not?" he asked, clinking his glass lightly against mine. Despite the noise and bustle of the bar around us, the sharp, delicate sound of our glasses touching rang clearly in my ears. I took a small sip. The bitterness spread through my mouth almost instantly. It tasted like it reached my heart. I gave a small shake of my head. "What about you?" I asked, setting my glass down but keeping my eyes on him. "What brings you here tonight?" This bar was the only one still open on this street. I'd found it by accident years ago, wandering through the neighborhood alone on New Year's Eve. Since then, I'd spent every New Year right here. He shook his head too, that same quiet smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Nothing to do at home," he said. "You mentioned this place once, so I thought I'd check it out." I had told him about this bar, on purpose. I'd guessed he'd show up tonight. I propped both elbows on the table now, cupping my face in my hands as I looked at him, feigning innocence. "Home alone? Where's your wife?" He let out a breath and swirled the liquid in his glass. "We had a fight. She went to her mom's." I blinked. "You didn't go after her?" He gave a helpless shrug. "She told me not to. And why she didn't want him to? Well, I knew that better than anyone. Because right now she was probably with my dad. The man sitting across from me was named Ethan Caldwell. And just like his name, there was something calm, clean, almost windswept about him. He wasn't strikingly handsome. Not the kind of guy who stopped you in your tracks, but there was a quiet, steady warmth about him that made you feel safe. The first time I saw him, I thought I must have found the wrong person. How could she, the woman who wrecked my family, leave him for my father? But unfortunately, I had found the right man. And even more tragically, Ethan had no idea his wife had been cheating on him for years. A man like him, gentle, faithful, completely unaware. I chatted with Ethan casually, our conversation floating between light topics and comfortable silences. We kept the perfect distance between us, polite, respectful, carefully drawn, until I saw the bartender add something into Ethan's drink. Something we had talked about beforehand. Only then did I smile behind the rim of my glass. This would be the best New Year I'd had in a long, long time. When Ethan woke up next to me, I quickly pulled the blanket over half my face, leaving only my red-rimmed eyes peeking out. He blinked in panic, instinctively scrambling back, and rolled right off the bed. Our clothes were scattered all over the floor in a tangled mess. "Ethan, you should go," I said, my voice trembling but calm. "Let's just pretend nothing happened." Still clutching the blanket, I sat up slowly. Ethan hurried to grab his shirt and wrapped it around himself. He sat down on the floor, not even trying to get up. The room went quiet. He didn't respond. A few moments later, I heard the rustle of fabric. He was finally getting dressed. When he stood, I was curled up on the far edge of the bed, blanket clutched tightly around me. I don't mind," I whispered, sniffling. My voice was so small I barely heard myself. He stood frozen beside the bed, awkward and lost. But before he could say anything more, I tugged the blanket tighter around me. The sheet shifted just a little, exposing a tiny smear of crimson against the stark white fabric. Blood. Just a faint mark, already drying but far too obvious. My finger curled instinctively under the blanket, the one I'd pricked the night before. I nudged the blanket again, covering the spot. "Ethan, please," I said, voice quiet but steady. "You should go." Ethan Caldwell was a good man, a kind man, a tragically naive man. That's why I knew he'd fall for it. After that night, he disappeared for a few days. Even his flower shop stayed closed. It wasn't until the 7th day of the new year, while I was at work, that I finally got a message from him. "Avery, I'm really sorry about what happened that night. I've been thinking it over, and no matter how I try to make it up to you, it just feels unfair to you." As I watched the typing bubble flicker in and out under his name, I cut him off. "Is your flower shop open today?" He stopped typing for a second, then quickly replied, "Yeah, it's open." I smiled. Hook, line, and sinker. "Then I'll swing by tonight to pick up a bouquet." And I added one more line. "Let's just call that your way of making it up to me. If you want to reel a man in, you use his guilt. Be understanding. Don't push. Don't beg. Don't demand. Just wait, graceful, patient, until the walls crumble and you move right in." That's what she taught me. And now, I was going to use everything I'd learned on her husband. That evening, I lingered at the office on purpose, dragging out every little task. It wasn't until my supervisor, a woman I called Big Sis, told me to head home that I finally grabbed my coat and left. By the time I reached Ethan's flower shop, it was almost 10. Most stores were still closed for the New Year holidays, their windows dark and empty. His was the only one with its lights still on. It looked lonely, exactly like the first time I ever saw him. "Sorry I'm so late," I said as soon as I walked in. "Didn't expect to get stuck working on the first day back." Ethan stepped out from the back when he heard my voice. Same as always, wearing that sleek black apron, arms tucked into matching long black sleeves, both practical and tasteful. In his hands was a bouquet. He walked slowly toward me. Pale yellow roses, white and gold baby's breath, and two soft camellias nestled in the center. A strange mix, but somehow it worked. If this were a different world, one where I wasn't so bent on revenge, and he wasn't already married, I think I would have fallen for him. Right then and there. I took the bouquet from him, beaming. When he started to speak, I gently pressed my index finger to his lips. "I love the flowers," I said. "Almost makes that whole overtime shift feel worth it." I gave the bouquet a playful little wave and turned to leave. But when I reached the door, I paused. Looking back at him, I gave a bright, dazzling smile, the kind you only give once in a lifetime. "Ethan, I'll definitely be buying from you again." He looked caught off guard like he hadn't expected that reaction. By the time he stepped outside to chase after me, I was already gone, watching him from the shadows of a street corner. He stood there under the cold streetlight, motionless, glowing like the bouquet in my arms. Beautiful, almost too easy. The next day, I got a phone call from my aunt. "Avery," she said with a sigh, her voice weighted with meaning. "I heard she and your dad are over. The affair's done. Just come home, okay? He's still your father." She'd cried harder than I did when my mom died. And now she could talk about it like it was nothing. I touched the edge of a camellia in the vase beside me and said calmly, "Aunt Rose, I never left out of spite. No one uses their mother's death to throw a tantrum. Everyone said I ran away because I was angry, that I dropped out of college and left home over a petty grudge, that I never came back because I was too proud. Come on, they'd say. There's no real grudge between a father and daughter. That's because they didn't watch their mother die right in front of them. They didn't see the light fade from her eyes, the injustice still lingering in them as they closed for the last time. 5 years ago," I said softly, "he stopped being my father. The day my mother died, I stopped having a dad. The next time I passed by Ethan Caldwell's flower shop, I saw her. She still had that same fragile, delicate look. After just a few words with Ethan, she ran out of the shop, tears in her eyes, like she was the one who'd been wronged. Right as Ethan stepped toward the door, probably intending to follow her, I appeared in his path. "Avery?" He blinked, surprised. I took a step closer, and he instinctively backed up, retreating into the shop. "Ethan," I said sweetly, "one of my colleagues isn't feeling well, and I thought I'd bring her some flowers to cheer her up." A lie, effortless. He didn't question it. He simply nodded and turned toward the counter to start arranging a bouquet. I glanced out the door, then asked, as if it were casual small talk, "That woman just now, who was she?" "My wife," he answered quietly, not even lifting his head, focused on tying the bouquet. I nodded like it meant nothing. "How long have you two been married?" I asked, keeping my tone light and offhand, like any customer passing time while waiting. His hands paused for a second, as if he had to really think about it. 5 years? 5 years. That was the year my mom died. That woman married Ethan after being with my father for 7 years. 5 years of marriage. No children. Why? Ethan finished tying the bouquet and handed it to me gently. "How much?" I asked, naturally, reaching out to take the flowers. He looked up at me, his voice low. "I'm getting a divorce, Avery." I looked up sharply, as if he'd just told me the most unexpected thing in the world. Given what I'd just seen, I had my suspicions. "She agreed to that?" I asked automatically. If that woman really wanted a divorce, why marry him in the first place? If she couldn't bring herself to leave him while sneaking around with my father, what made him think she'd be willing to leave now that that affair was over? Sure enough, Ethan shook his head. "I'll talk to her," he said, eyes steady, like he was promising me something. I didn't say anything else. I just smiled and gave the bouquet a playful wave. "Thanks for the flowers, Ethan." He didn't ask for payment, so I said nothing more and stepped out of the shop. Just as I walked outside, she came back down the street. We brushed shoulders as we passed. She still reeked of him, that strong, nauseating cologne my father always wore. That same suffocating scent clung to her, bold and vile. The more she clung to Ethan, the more determined I became. Because if she walked away now, if she gave up too easily, then none of this would mean anything. I wanted her to suffer, to feel even a fraction of the desperation and madness my mother endured. My aunt had told me that yes, she'd gone to see Graham Foster, my father, over the holidays. She went to end things. He'd been devastated afterward. Spent days in a fog. And after all that, then he remembered I existed. When he finally called, I put him on speaker and tossed the phone onto the table. I began trimming the bouquet I'd taken from Ethan's shop. "Avery," came Graham's voice, thick with contrived guilt. "I know it's my fault. It's been so many years. Can't you just forgive your old man?" I said nothing, snipping away at the flowers, leaves falling around me like memories I didn't want. He kept talking, his voice dripping with either real regret or a damn good imitation of it. "Your mother wouldn't have wanted—" Snip. I cut the stem of the camellia in one clean stroke. I looked up, staring at the bouquet on the table. And for a moment, I wasn't seeing flowers, I was seeing her. My mother drifting through the air like petals. Before crashing in front of that car, "You don't get to talk about her," I said coldly. My voice echoed through the silent apartment like a gust of wind in a crypt. So cold in here. Maybe it was time to let someone warm it up. I hung up on Graham, picked up the vase, and walked toward the outlet on the wall. With one hand, I dialed Ethan's number. With the other, I poured the water from the vase straight onto the socket. The phone rang twice. Then he picked up. "Hello?" Ethan said, voice faint. In the background, I heard the soft, muffled sound of a woman crying. I gave a slow, quiet smile. The lights flickered, then went out. I acted like I hadn't heard anything strange. Sniffed, just enough to sound vulnerable. "Ethan," I whispered, "I'm scared." When Ethan Caldwell showed up at my door, I threw myself into his arms without hesitation. "Ethan, you're finally here," I said, voice trembling, barely holding back a sob. His hands hovered behind me, stiff for a moment, then gently patted my back. "What happened to the lights?" I shook my head. "I accidentally knocked over a vase," I said softly. Right after that, there was this loud pop, and everything just went dark. It was the story I'd planned in advance. Ethan stepped inside and walked to the fuse box near the door. He opened it and examined it with a sigh. "Was there water in that vase?" I nodded. Earlier, when the customer service rep told me their electricians had already clocked out and wouldn't be available until morning, I thought maybe fate really is on my side tonight. Ethan ended the call with the electric company just as I looked up at him with wide eyes. "Ethan!" I bit my lip nervously. "Could you stay with me tonight?" Maybe I'd sounded just scared enough. Because after a brief hesitation, he agreed. Unfortunately, I only rented a studio apartment, which meant just one bed. Ethan didn't even seem to pause before offering, "I'll sleep on the floor." I laughed softly. "There's a couch, Ethan." That one little laugh made the room feel warmer, cozier, like the air had thawed between us. Ethan laid down on the couch without another word. I got into bed, stared up at the ceiling for a moment, then asked in a casual voice, "Ethan, if your wife finds out, do you think she'll be upset?" He didn't answer right away. The apartment fell so quiet, I could hear the soft rhythm of both our breathing. Just when I thought he wouldn't reply, he let out a long sigh. "She doesn't want to divorce me." There was resignation in his voice, a quiet kind of certainty, like someone who'd made up their mind, but was still waiting for the world to catch up. I sighed too, pretending to be understanding. "I've heard people say, better to tear down a temple than ruin a marriage," I said gently. "If she's not ready, maybe you two should try to work things out." Work things out so I could come in later and tear it all down myself. Anyone listening would have thought I was wise and mature. But suddenly, Ethan sat up. He looked in my direction and sighed again, long and heavy. He seemed like he wanted to say something, but in the end, he said nothing at all. He just lay back down. The next morning, before I even opened my eyes, I smelled something warm and comforting. I sat up in bed and saw breakfast laid out on the table. Something simple, but the sight of it made my throat tighten instantly. The last time someone did this for me, it was 5 years ago. I saw it then, my mother standing at the stove, glancing over her shoulder, half smiling and half scolding. "You lazy girl, if you don't get up now, you'll be late." And for a second, Ethan's face reminded me of hers. He placed a glass of milk down on the table and frowned. "Why is your fridge completely empty? Don't tell me you never cook." I tilted my head back, blinking fast, waiting for the sting in my nose to pass before I shuffled over in my slippers and sat down. "Did you go out to get all this?" I asked, eyeing the breakfast that looked far too good to be just thrown together. He handed me a spoon and replied, "Just something simple I made. It's not much, but hopefully enough to get you through the morning." I smiled without answering. He didn't say anything else either. I sipped my porridge in silence, then suddenly there it was. A peeled boiled egg resting at the edge of my bowl. Just like before. My mom used to do the exact same thing. She'd grumble the whole time she peeled it, but in the end, she'd place the egg in front of me without saying a word. "Ethan," I whispered, my gaze fixed on the egg in my bowl. "Yeah?" he replied, gentle. I looked up at him with a smile. "It's really good. Almost as good as my mom used to make." Who knew plain porridge and eggs could taste like this? Ever since I told Ethan Caldwell his cooking was delicious, he'd started dropping by every few days to cook for me, but never to stay the night. Sometimes I couldn't tell whether I was trying to seduce him, or if I just landed myself a personal chef. "Ethan, I really feel bad about you running back and forth like this," I said, tone sweet and apologetic, even as I shamelessly enjoyed the food. He just sat in front of me. He placed a bowl of rice in front of me and reached out to gently ruffle my hair. "Eat up," he said softly. There were moments, so many moments, where it felt like I had a home again. When Ethan was around, this little apartment didn't seem so cold anymore. And then reality came crashing back in the form of her text. "Ethan, you got a message," I said casually, catching a glimpse of his phone screen before it dimmed. He was in the kitchen collecting our empty dishes. "Okay," he called back, not even glancing at it. I leaned my head on one hand and lazily pulled the phone toward me. I already had a feeling who it was. Bingo. "Ethan, I know you didn't mean what happened that night. It was the alcohol. I'm not mad, really. If I hadn't impulsively stormed off, none of this would have happened. It's all my fault, please. Can we not get a divorce? Touching. She managed to paint herself as the helpless victim and the understanding wife all in one breath. She really was good at this. I scrolled up, browsing their recent chat history, days of back and forth drama. If you feel guilty toward that girl, I can talk to her. Maybe explain things. And then another message came in, right as I was reading. What if we offered her money? Didn't your dad leave you a good amount? We could give her something as compensation. Would that work? One message after another. She was clearly desperate. From the looks of the conversation, Ethan must have finally moved out last night, trying to follow through on the divorce. Just then, he came out of the kitchen. His long fingers reached down and gently took the phone from my hand. The screen still displayed her latest message in bold clarity. My throat tightened. I looked up at him, eyes already rimmed red. Ethan! He frowned at the screen, clearly displeased. You shouldn't come over anymore, I said, dropping my gaze, voice soft and shaking. If your wife sees something and gets the wrong idea, I swear I never wanted your money. This is all my fault. Ethan slipped the phone into his pocket and placed a warm hand on my head. This isn't your fault, Avery, he said with a sigh. He didn't even scold me for reading his messages. When he left that night, he promised he wouldn't come by for a while. He told me to take care of myself and that he'd sort everything out soon. I'll fix this, he said. I didn't answer, just stood in the doorway and watched him walk away. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and smiled slowly. Of course it wasn't my fault. Still, kind of a shame. His cooking really was fantastic. The next couple days passed quietly. Before I even had the chance to make my next move, a new friend request popped up on my messaging app. The profile photo was familiar. So was the nickname. I accepted instantly. Hi, I'm Ethan's wife. My hands trembled just a little as I stared at that message. This moment. I'd waited so long for it. I stared and stared until my eyes began to sting. Then another message came in. Can we meet? I replied calmly. Sorry, I was busy just now. Is something wrong, ma'am? Another quick response. I'd prefer to talk in person if that's okay. I tapped the screen off and Mom's photo lit up on the lock screen. She was smiling so warmly. I did it, Mom, I whispered into the stillness of the room. My words felt like pebbles dropping into a dark, silent lake. No echo, no ripple. No answer. I opened the chat again and typed, Sure, where would you like to meet? She asked to meet at a tea house. Before heading in, I sent Ethan Caldwell my location. Ethan, your wife asked to meet? I'm worried something might get twisted or misunderstood. If you're free, would you mind coming by too? Once I hit send, I slipped my phone into my bag and walked through the front doors. The moment the private room opened, I saw her sitting there. She was dressed up, tastefully and deliberately. The kind of polished look that shaved years off her appearance. Standing next to Ethan, they'd actually look like a perfect match. If she hadn't chased after Richard Graham, maybe they really could have had a happy, quiet life, like the family I once had. My grip on my purse tightened as I walked in with a soft, practiced smile. Hi, I said, settling into the seat across from her. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, pausing with a flicker of surprise. I knew why. No matter how much makeup I wore, there were traces of Richard in my face. But luckily for me, Richard had never treated me like a real daughter. No framed pictures of me on his phone. He didn't even have me added on his messaging app. I calmly accepted her gaze, slid my purse off my shoulder, and set it beside me like I was just catching up with a friend. She gave a small nod and waited for the server to leave before speaking bluntly. Ethan's too soft-hearted. He still feels guilty about what happened. There are things he finds hard to say. I raised my tea but said nothing. You're young. You've got your whole life ahead of you. Don't throw it away over one drunken mistake. With that, she pulled out a small envelope and slid it across the table to me. There's some money in here. Consider it a gift from one woman to another. I just hope we never have to see each other again. Crystal clear. She was offering to buy me off for one night. I looked down at the envelope, then slowly curled my lips into a smile. I have a better idea, I said sweetly, lifting my eyes to hers. Why don't you just give Ethan to me? That line wasn't part of the original plan. Maybe it was because I'd gotten used to his cooking. Maybe something else. But it slipped out before I could stop it. She clearly hadn't expected it either. Her voice rose sharply. What did you just say? I smiled, letting my eyes crinkle at the corners. Just kidding, I said. I'm not trying to ruin your marriage. I'm only here to ruin your life. She exhaled, visibly relieved. Her expression softened into something smug, like she thought she'd won. Really? She asked. Of course, I replied, resting my fingers lightly on the envelope. Besides, homewreckers never get happy endings, right? My voice was calm, my smile still in place, but the temperature dropped like a blade of frost. I looked her dead in the eyes. Isn't that right, ma'am? Her hand trembled slightly as she lifted her teacup. She didn't answer. The room went silent, so quiet we could hear the footsteps in the hallway outside. One pair of footsteps stopped right outside our room. A knock. Then the door opened. Ethan stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable, but his face noticeably pale. I stood and picked up the envelope from the table. His eyes shifted to my hand, to the envelope, and in that moment, I knew he understood exactly what had just happened. His brows furrowed sharply. Ethan! His wife stood too, flustered, her voice uncertain. I turned to him with a bright, breezy smile and tilted my head. Your wife seems to have misunderstood something, I said sweetly. Would you mind clearing it up for me? Then I slipped the envelope into the front pocket of his coat. You don't owe me anything, Ethan, and I don't want your money. But thank you, both of you, for the kind gesture. With that, I walked out without looking back. The rest? My mom died on New Year's Eve. Right there, at the intersection across from our house. I was standing on the other side of the street when I watched her body get flung into the air by a black sedan. She looked like a withered flower petal, torn by the wind, streaked with tears and fading fast. I didn't know why she suddenly ran into the street. I didn't know why she was crying. Not until 2 years later, when I found traces of her. That woman? I became obsessed, frantic, tearing through everything I could find, hunting for evidence to confirm what my gut had always whispered. That was when I stumbled upon my father's old phone. And there it was, in the trash folder. A single text, sent on New Year's Eve from that woman, using my dad's phone. Richard isn't coming home this year. Please stop clinging to him. We're in love. Just one sentence. And somehow it turned my mother into the homewrecker. Like she was the one who ruined someone else's family. Like the kind, gentle woman who stood by my father's side for over a decade was the villain all along. That day I lost it. I ran out of the house like a storm, gripping that old phone in my hand, just like she must have done. I went straight to Richard Graham's place. My hands were trembling when I shoved the phone toward him. Did you know about this? I asked. All I needed was a simple denial. If he'd just said no, I would have believed him. I would have chalked it up to infidelity, a moment of weakness, the mistake of a man. But he lowered his head and said nothing. And in that moment, he became a murderer. Not in the courtroom sense, but in the way that counts. He killed my mom. So you're the one who deleted her texts? I asked, my voice like a blade of ice in December. He didn't deny it, which meant not only did he know about the message, he tried to erase the evidence. That day was darker than the day my mother died. It was like I had to watch her die all over again. In my mind, I saw her eyes, wet, unwilling, full of heartbreak, as if she was looking straight through time and asking me why. When I finally woke up, drenched in sweat and tangled in my sheets, it took me a second to remember where I was. Another dream. Another night with her in it. The tiny apartment was so quiet I could hear my own breathing. I lifted my hand to my face and felt the tears. Still fresh. Just then my phone buzzed. The sudden light almost painful in the pitch-black room. It was from Ethan. I'm sorry, Ivy. That sorry was never his to give. I didn't think she'd go that far. I've made it clear to her. This won't happen again. I sent him a lighthearted sticker in response. It's okay, Ethan. I think your wife just sees me as one of those girls. But don't worry, I'm not taking it to heart. After that, he didn't text again. What I didn't expect was for him to show up the next morning at my door. He was holding breakfast and smiling. Let me guess. You haven't been eating properly these past few days? I blinked at him, stunned. Knew it, he said, placing the bag in my hands. Then, from behind his back, he pulled out a bouquet of fresh flowers. It's been a while since you visited the shop. I figured the ones you had are probably wilted by now. He peeked over my shoulder, and when his eyes landed on the drooping flowers in the vase, he gave me that told-you-so look. I took everything from him and murmured, Ethan. He waited. And in the warm light of morning, with his soft expression and gentle patience, I felt something twist in my chest. For a moment, I didn't know what I was doing anymore. What I really wanted. If Ethan really was a good man, how could he fall for someone like me, even if I'd tricked him into thinking we'd slept together? If he really was a good man, how could he love me while married to someone else? Maybe all men were the same after all? I sighed. Stay and eat with me? Ethan once told me that his marriage to her had been arranged when they were kids. Their families pushed them into it. His grandmother especially adored her. That's why the divorce had been so difficult to finalize. But that wasn't the truth. The real reason? She refused to let him go. I leaned my head on my hand, half teasing as I asked, Ethan, are you trying so hard to get a divorce because of me? His expression flickered, just for a second, something uncomfortable crossing his face. He set down his utensils and looked at me with surprising seriousness. Ivy, he said, I'll take responsibility. I laughed softly. You don't have to. I didn't want his responsibility. I just wanted him to divorce her. But the more I insisted he didn't owe me anything, the more determined he became to show me he did. So he started coming over to cook again, every day. But this time he also brought flowers. Every other day, like clockwork. And if I so much as said one bouquet looked nice, he'd bring more of the same the next time. What surprised me was that his wife hadn't shown up once in 2 weeks. Then I saw her again, at the hospital. I'd gone in for a hormone test, my cycle had been irregular, and she was outside another examination room, holding a clipboard, waiting. The words family planning were stamped across the top of her form. I didn't need to see the rest to know what it said, or who it was about. I felt sick, physically, viscerally nauseous. And then she spotted me. She startled, visibly, and quickly muttered something to the person behind her about being in the wrong line before stepping away. She walked toward me, I calmly tucked my own paperwork into my purse, letting her see the motion. Her brows furrowed slightly. You sick? She asked bluntly, skipping any pleasantries or even my name. I lowered my eyes and shook my head. My hand clutching the strap of my bag tightened just slightly, just enough for her to notice. I lifted my gaze, casually redirecting, You not feeling well? As I said it, my eyes dropped deliberately to the form in her hands. She smiled sheepishly, a little forced. Ethan didn't want me telling anyone, she said, blushing. But I guess it's not a bad thing. You might as well know. She held the form up. Just for a second, but I saw it. Early intrauterine pregnancy. The words hit me like nails hammered into my eyes. Even though I tried to prepare myself, told myself over and over that none of this mattered, those words still pierced something in me. I forced a smile. Congratulations. So much for saying she'd ended things with him over the holidays. The form in her hand was the punchline to one cruel cosmic joke. She glanced at my bag, voice light, casual. You here with a friend? I paused, then gave a small nod. Even though she masked it well, I could see the worry in her eyes. So she was afraid. Good. That meant the show was just getting started. Sure enough, 2 nights later, there was a knock on my door. Ethan stood there, reeking of alcohol. Ethan? He leaned against the doorframe, looking exhausted, disheveled in a way I'd never seen before. Maybe he noticed the flicker of guardedness in my eyes, because he hesitated a moment before asking softly, Can I crash on your couch tonight? His voice carried a quiet desperation. Normally, if a married man showed up drunk asking to stay over, I wouldn't let him in, even if he begged. But something in my gut told me this was about her. And seeing Ethan like that, so wrecked, so undone, softened something in me. I opened the door and let him in. It wasn't the first time he'd slept on that couch anyway. While I was still debating whether I should grab the stun gun in my drawer, just in case, I turned around and found him already passed out. I couldn't help it. I laughed. So it was true. He really did just fall asleep when he drank. Probably didn't even realize it himself. That woman had snapped. The night Ethan passed out on my couch, she blew up my phone, message after message. Is he at your place? How can you be so shameless? You're young and this is what you're doing? Playing the homewrecker? Every word she sent felt like a poisoned needle. But the more she insulted me, the more it sounded like she was screaming at a mirror. At the version of herself from the past. 7 years. I glanced at Ethan asleep on my couch. I wanted to laugh, but the sound stuck in my throat. And you? That's what I texted her back. I stared at the venomous words on my screen and replied again. Claire, what about you? What does that make you? That sentence landed like a soaked rag flung into someone's face. Ugly and heavy. After I sent it, the storm of insults stopped. For a while, I thought that would be the end of it. That the night might settle down. But eventually, she sent one more message. I'm Ethan's legal wife. Legal wife? I tossed the phone aside and didn't bother replying. My mom had been my father's legal wife, too. And how did that end? Ethan must have drunk a lot. Even when morning came, he still hadn't woken up. I had to hand it to him. He made it all the way here before collapsing. I didn't wake him. I got ready quietly and went to work. When I came home that evening, I passed Ethan's flower shop and noticed it was still closed. Had he really slept all day? I felt a flicker of concern. But the moment I slid my key into the lock, I caught the scent of food from inside. Then I heard his voice, irritated. We agreed 5 years ago. Either of us could walk away from this anytime. You're going back on your word, and it's disappointing. He was on the phone. I couldn't hear the other person, but his tone was clear. I've said everything I need to. If you keep pushing, I'll have no choice but to tell Grandma the truth. So I'd been right. Their marriage had been fake from the start. She must have conspired with my father 5 years ago, just another cover to dodge suspicion. Back then, the year my mom died, their contact had noticeably decreased. No one had thought anything of it. I'd also heard Ethan had a rocky relationship with his father, which was why he opened the flower shop and lived on his own. After his father passed away last year, he apparently inherited quite a bit. So the real question was, did Claire refuse the divorce because she genuinely loved Ethan or because she wanted a piece of that inheritance? I heard the call end, then finally turned the key and opened the door. Ethan stood in the kitchen wearing an apron. Not just any apron, that apron. The frilly pink one I bought on a whim, the one with the ruffled hem. You're back? Perfect timing, dinner's ready. He grinned as he said it, eyes crinkling like he hadn't just been furious moments ago. I nodded, washed up, and sat at the table. Watching him bring out dish after dish, something tight and wrinkled in my chest slowly smoothed itself out. Everything about this was warm and temporary. Because once he found out the truth, that I'd gotten close to him to destroy Claire, he'd never come back here again. Would he still cook for me? Of course not. I rolled the chopsticks between my fingers, pressing harder than I meant to. But it didn't really matter. I'd lived alone in the dark for so long, I'd learned to make peace with it. Ethan sat down across from me, the pink apron still tied around his waist. He caught me staring. This apron really doesn't feel like your style, he said, smiling. Then he paused, reconsidered. Actually, maybe it kind of is. See, even he didn't know what my style was. I didn't reply. I just started eating. Honestly, I wasn't in the habit of eating dinner at all until Ethan started coming around again. He sat across from me like it was the most natural thing in the world, asking about my day, my job, little things like he was part of my life. And I answered him. Every question. The whole atmosphere felt strangely domestic, too real, too soft. Then he dropped it. Ivy, do you mind if I stay here for a couple days? I bit down on my chopsticks hard. My gums ached from the sudden pressure. But I nodded. I didn't know if I said yes because I wanted to mess with Claire, or because deep down I didn't want to be alone. The last thing I expected was for Claire to show up at my workplace. So that's what she'd been doing these past few days, digging up where I worked. She stood at the entrance, completely stripped of her usual polished poise. She looked like a woman unhinged. For the first time, I felt a strange sense of relief. If Mom were still here, gentle, elegant, always composed, she would have hated to see herself standing on the street like this, screaming like a madwoman, clawing at a mistress. Ivy, you shameless bitch. Seducing a married man, may lightning strike you down. She pointed at me and unleashed a fury of slurs, loud enough for the entire office to hear. Gone was the cool, superior woman who once handed me a bank card and told me to walk away. Now she was just a wreck in designer heels. Oddly, being screamed at like that made me happy. Because this was it. The moment her mask would finally rip apart. The moment I could drag her into the hell she built. Don't let her fool you, Claire shouted to the growing crowd. She's a filthy slut. Sleeps around with men all the time. Must have drugged my husband or something. Her words got uglier with every breath. My coworkers stood frozen, watching with wide eyes. Some even pulled out their phones to record. And Claire loved it. So did I. I walked toward her slowly, calmly. Every dirty word that spilled from her mouth. I imagined she was shouting it at the girl she used to be, the one who ruined my family 7 years ago. I almost hoped she'd keep going. You knew I was pregnant, and you still went after him. He can't even come home anymore, you disgusting whore! Gasps rippled through the room. Of course, to them I must have looked absolutely heartless. Then she said it. No wonder you're turned out like this, with a mother like that. That was when I took 2 strides forward and slapped her, hard. Smack. The room went dead silent. I stared at her coldly. You think you have the right to talk about her? She stood there stunned, clutching her cheek. I grabbed her chin and smiled. You're pregnant, huh? Are you even sure whose baby it is? Her eyes widened in horror. I gave her a shove and she stumbled backward onto the floor. What's wrong? I crouched beside her, voice dripping with venom. Don't think this baby might look a little too much like my dad? I tapped her belly with a single finger. The look on her face. She must have thought I was a ghost come back to claim her life. Who knows, I said. Maybe the kid will look just like me. By then, security had rushed over. I stood up, still facing her. Still smiling. You told my mom you and my dad were true love, remember? So what now? You're in love with your husband all of a sudden? My poor idiot of a father still believes you actually loved him. Security helped her to her feet. But knowing she was pregnant, they only gently asked her to leave. She shook her head violently. No, this can't be happening. You're the homewrecker, she screamed. You seduced my husband. I laughed. Oh, and how exactly did I do that? Did you see it with your own eyes? I treated him like an older brother, that's all. Claire tore away from the guards and lunged at me, grabbing my shirt. If she was heading to hell, she was determined to drag me with her. You liar, she shrieked. You're pregnant. With his baby. I calmly pulled her hands off my shirt, one finger at a time. Looked her straight in the eye. You shouldn't spread rumors like that. I've never even slept with a man. I leaned in, whispering sweetly in her ear. That's funny, Claire. I've never even slept with a man. She reeled back in shock, stumbled, and fell to the floor again. I don't believe you. I stood over her, lips curled in a cold, triumphant smile. We can go to the hospital if you want proof. You ruined my family. And now you want to destroy my reputation too. I dropped the smile, turned to the stunned room, and said, voice as sharp as glass, You're disgusting, Claire. You don't get talk about my mom like that. News about Claire exploded online. Apparently, she was rushed to the hospital that same day. She lost the baby. The scandal spread like wildfire, videos popping up across every major platform. I used to imagine all sorts of ways to get revenge on her. One of them looked a lot like what she did to me. Storm into her office. Show up at her doorstep. Scream, cry, accuse. But I was just a student back then. What kind of impact could someone like me make? The day Claire chose to be with Gabriel, my father, she'd already mapped out every escape route. She'd tell people it was all a misunderstanding. She'd claim I was mentally unstable. Worst case scenario, she'd resign, get a quiet divorce, and go right back to playing house with him. I thought about it for a long time. So long that it twisted something in me. So long that hatred began to rot me from the inside out. And then I met Liam, the one man I instinctively knew Claire would never let go of. I knew from the start Liam didn't love her, but that didn't matter. As long as she loved him, that was enough. Even if what she loved was his money. For a whole year, I laid the groundwork, dropping little things at Liam's flower shop, staying in the periphery of his life. Until finally Claire cut things off with Gabriel. And the only unpredictable piece in all of it was Liam. When I got home that night, he was already gone. The apartment was spotless. In the vase sat the flowers he brought over yesterday. Fresh yesterday, but now they already looked wilted. I had just collapsed onto the couch when my phone rang. It was Gabriel. Of course, the internet works faster than anything else. I answered, then set the phone down on speaker. What the hell have you done? He roared, his voice seething with rage. What a joke. Even now, he thought he had the right to be angry. I drummed my fingers on the sofa. You've seen the news, haven't you? Surprised? That the woman you supported with my mom's death settlement would turn around and accuse your daughter to protect another man? I let out a short, bitter laugh. Is that what you call love? Or are you just heartbroken over the son you'll never meet? The line went quiet except for the sound of heavy breathing. After a while, he spoke again. Ivy, what happened to you? His voice cracked. You used to be such a good girl. I was a good girl. So good I didn't protect my mother. He hung up soon after. Then my aunt called. I hesitated before answering, because I didn't know what she was going to say. And I was afraid. Afraid she'd say exactly what I didn't want to hear. She's the only one left in this world who reminds me of Mom. As soon as I picked up, I heard her crying. You stupid girl, she sobbed. Why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you say anything? She cried for a long time. She said I was just as stubborn as my mother. Said I bottle everything up. Said she would always love me. That she was waiting for me to come home. At some point, night had fallen. I curled up on the couch, suddenly freezing. So cold that the tears just came on their own. And that night, I dreamed of Mom again. It was New Year's Eve. I was walking home and saw the black car speeding toward her. I ran toward her, desperate to shove her out of the way. But she used all her strength to push me instead. So that was it. I wasn't on the other side of the road. I was right there, right beside her. Close enough to see the tears in her eyes. Close enough that if I'd just reached a little further, just a little further, I could have saved her. Ivy, close your eyes. Don't look, she said, her voice vanishing into the wind. That was her last request. Not for me to run, not to scream, not even to hold on. Just close my eyes. Claire really had lost it. Public opinion kept spiraling out of control. Word was she had visitors every day at the hospital. The staff even moved her to a private room, so she wouldn't disturb the other patients. My aunt told me she'd called Gabriel. Just like I predicted, Claire thought she could cry her way back into his arms. Gabriel cared about appearances. If she'd still been the same composed, elegant Claire, he might have taken her back just to save face. But this Claire had fallen apart because of Liam. She'd even lost the baby. Gabriel hung up on her before she could finish crying. It was a miscarriage to begin with. Add all this chaos, of course she cracked. That's what I overheard someone saying behind my back when I went in to submit my resignation. Naturally, no one had anything kind to say about me either. Claire had lost her mind. But I was no saint either. Not that I ever pretended to be. The department lead who accepted my resignation sighed long and hard. You really didn't have to go this far? You just threw away your future? I knew what she meant. She had plans to promote me. She'd had faith in me. Until this. But what future did I have, really? I was nothing more than a ghost. One Claire pushed into the abyss. Just waiting for the day I could drag her down with me. And even now, I didn't feel any joy from it. The day after I quit, Liam came back. I was just turning off the lights, suitcase in hand, when I opened the door and light poured into the room. And there he was, standing outside. He looked like he'd just gotten there. Forehead glistening with sweat, hair tousled from running. Going somewhere? He asked, eyes flicking to the suitcase. I nodded. It was over. I needed to get away. Clear my head. He must have seen the videos online. He had to know I'd used him. I didn't think he'd ever come back. And if he did, it'd be to confront me. To demand answers. To make me pay. He stepped closer. Where to? I wasn't sure what he wanted. I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe I just wonder, let the road decide. Before I knew it, my back was against the wall. Liam braced one arm beside my head, leaning in close. His gaze swept over me like I was standing there bare, and it made me want to disappear into the floor. Ivy, I didn't think you were this kind of person. His brows furrowed slightly. I'd known him a long time, and I'd never seen him angry. But he had every right to be. He stepped even closer. So close I thought he might kiss me. And the fact that I thought that made me hate myself a little. Then he said, low and quiet, did you think you could just walk away and not take responsibility? Responsibility? For what? I looked up sharply, and my lips nearly grazed his jaw. Hot. Flushed. We shared a bed, Ivy. His breath brushed my ear. That comes with responsibility. But I was the one who'd lured him in. I was the one who orchestrated all of this. So why did those words make my face burn? I ducked under his arm and slipped away. Liam, he answered with a quiet, then casually flipped the light switch on. The room flooded with brightness. You don't hate me? I asked, surprised by how small my voice sounded. You should, at the very least, blame me, because I'd meant to use him. From the very beginning. Instead, he grabbed my suitcase in one hand, ruffled my hair with the other, and walked back inside. No point in wasting energy on hate, he said, glancing over his shoulder. But don't lie to me again. Then why'd you disappear? I asked, blurting it out. He'd been gone for days, and I wasn't sure if I'd been hoping he'd return or terrified that he might. My grandma got sick from all the stress. I went to check on her. He set the suitcase down and turned to face me. Standing under the light, he raised a hand and waved me over. He looked like something out of a dream. Warm, steady, unreal. You've barely eaten, haven't you? What do you want for dinner? My battered heart felt like it had just been gently unwrinkled. Still warm, still beating. Bonus epilogue. Liam once told me that he and Claire had been nothing more than roommates with a marriage certificate. He only married her to please his grandmother. They were never truly husband and wife. Watching Claire unravel like this, he didn't pity her. If anything, he pitied me. And just like that, he and I began our drifting life together. Each new city we landed in felt like a fresh start, a rebirth. I didn't want to become someone useless living off him, so I started freelance writing, submitting pieces for money, travel logs, essays, whatever I could shape from what we saw along the way, but I never wrote about me. Maybe because I never fully accepted myself. But Liam did. He healed parts of me even time couldn't touch. I confessed everything I'd done to him, but he didn't flinch. You think I don't know what I'm like when I'm drunk? He laughed. I was the one planning to latch onto you, Ivy. When did you start liking me? I once asked, curled in his arms as we looked out over the endless ocean. I'd asked a dozen times before, and every time he'd answer as if it were the first. A long time ago, he said. You walked past my flower shop. You were being sneaky, trying to go unnoticed. And you accidentally kicked a stray cat lying by the curb. You panicked, tried to hide from me, but still bent down and whispered sorry to the cat. You were so clumsy, but I knew I'd fall for you. Let her explain it herself.